Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's Business Success Series presented by Manulife. What you need to know about your legal options when it comes to eliminating and forgiving your debt. My name is Ian McLean, and I'm the President and CEO of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we do live and work in the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples as we seek a renewed relationship based on a foundation of mutual understanding and respect. As participants in today's virtual event, we are coming together as one. We believe everyone is free to be their true self and receive the same respect and opportunity regardless of age, ethnicity, gender, culture, identity, sexual orientation, beliefs, or language. We hope you will join us in fostering a positive environment here today that is a safe and welcoming space for all. We know that there's more that we can do and are committed to listening, learning, and growing as we go. Today's session would not be possible without the continued support of our sponsors. And so a special thank you today to our title sponsor for the Business Success Series, Manulife, our platinum sponsor for the series, our friends from the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region, and March sponsor, RBC. And to today's event sponsor, Sarnowski Debt Law. These organizations and many others are committed to supporting our local economy and providing businesses with the resources and tools they need to thrive. Just before the session starts, I'd like to go over a quick few reminders. Please ensure your microphone is muted throughout the presentation so we can avoid any background noise. If you have a tech-related question, please comment in the chat section, and a representative of our team will be back to you momentarily. If you have a question for today's speaker, they'll be gathered throughout the session, and I'll try and get those to our speaker and get to as many of those questions as possible throughout the presentation. All attendees will be sent a recording of today's presentation, and it will also be made available on the Greater KW Chamber website. I would now like to invite Erin Korstorffen, Commercial Account Manager with RBC Royal Bank, to introduce today's guest. Erin.
Thank you, Ian. RBC Royal Bank is proud to be this month's presenting sponsor of the Business Success Series. I have the privilege of introducing today's guest, Debbie Dokas. Debbie is Managing Partner of Sarnowski Debt Law. She works very hard on raising awareness for Canadians to let them know that they have legal options when it comes to eliminating unnecessary debt and keeping themselves and their business afloat. Debbie uses federal government legislation to help Canadians to qualify for economic stimulus programs designed to forgive debt and avoid going bankrupt. Thank you for joining us today. I'll now pass it back to Ian.
Well, thank you so much. And I would take just a moment to recognize it is, we had International Women's Day yesterday. Our chamber hosted a event with some amazing women on Friday. We always do it the Friday before International Women's Day. So I want to recognize that the importance of and the contribution of the many women, not only in the chamber, but throughout the community. And so we're very pleased to both have Debbie and Erin join us today. Listen, Debbie, let's get right to it. And I guess maybe the way I'd like to start, because we can't start any conversation without at least having some discussion of COVID. And I guess the theme or the question that I have is, you will have experienced this. Certainly it's something that myself, my colleagues at the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce and business organizations right across Waterloo Region and across the country, frankly, many businesses are really struggling with the additional debt that they've had to take on. It's great that they've had some made available to them to keep themselves going through these last 2 years, but it adds an extra layer of debt to what normal debt levels that a business would use to operate and be able to manage. Where do you see that right now? I mean, does it matter on the size of business, or is everyone going to have to struggle or at least address that additional layer of debt and manage that, especially in the short term as we come out of COVID?
Well, first of all, thanks for the wonderful introduction, both of you, and for the kind and warm welcome and allowing me to be here today. That is a loaded question. Do you want the polite answer or do you want the real answer to that one, Ian?
We don't do polite here on Business Success Series. We want the straight goods because we all need to know what the real answer is. And especially, in the chamber, and you know this from your business, 75% of our businesses would have 10 or 15 employees or less. So the small businesses are the ones that are really hit by this and need to get the straight goods on what should be their plan or their path to kind of get through this. So give us the unvarnished truth.
Well, it's dreary, I'll be honest with you, particularly with small businesses and particularly with those specializing in the service industry of any kind that were forced to undergo how many shutdowns in total. Business is difficult enough as business owners know, but to be shut down on that level and then all the repercussions of that, not just the immediate loss of income on that, but when it continued to go on for so long, combined with CERB and other things, you saw a loss of the ability to even maintain your employees. So when they were allowed to open up for brief periods of time, they wouldn't have the staff to be able to do it. And it's just, there's no easy way to say it. It's the kiss of death. I have never seen business debt on this level before. And I would be, I think it's safe to say, majority of Canadian businesses today, the majority of businesses are carrying some form of unnecessary debt. And COVID has just put an exponential amount on that for obvious reasons. So this is where I'm at, because I'm watching these businesses struggle. They're struggling. I would say you'd be hard pressed to find a single Canadian in this country, anyone, anywhere, that isn't somehow affected by debt right now due to what's happened with COVID. And whether they're personally affected with debt issues or they just know someone or some business that's affected by debt. I don't think anyone can say, well, I don't know anybody. Things are great. That's just not the picture. And this is why I see all the wonderful things that the Chamber does and all the services they offer. And you guys all work so hard to do this. And I'm proud to be a member too. And I'm very pleased to be allowed this opportunity, because I think today we've got another tool for your toolkit to reach out to these businesses, the people that I'm talking to that are sitting there listening, saying, yeah, I do have debt and I'm not sure where to go from here. And it doesn't have to be overwhelming debt. I mean, this is what we deal with as well. People who are on the verge of bankruptcy, this is who we're rescuing. But proactive, we also have proactive clients in the sense that they're still managing right now. They've got a lot of debt, but somehow they're still keeping their head above water, and power to them. But eventually we know where that goes and it's unsustainable. So often we get clients come to us proactively to say, look, I'm doing okay so far, but I know it's not going to last.
Well, maybe that's maybe one of the pieces here. It better to, and we see this with our friends at Cowan, whether it's on insurance risk or managing risk inside your business. This is another one of those. Burying your head in the sand and hoping it goes away is not a plan. Crossing your fingers. That was me in my exams in university, but it's not really a plan. So maybe talk about that. It feels overwhelming, and until you get experts like yourselves or your trusted advisors saying there are ways to deal with either reducing your debt, refinancing, maybe talk a little bit about what some of those options are, because it is overwhelming if you do nothing. But if you work with someone like yourself or trusted professional or advisor, there are tools that you can do to spread out the payments or refinance or come to different agreements with lenders. Maybe talk a little bit about that first. Is that it feels overwhelming, but there are plans, there are process, there's expertise that can help you manage through that.
Well, and better than managing, I've got one better for you. It's not simply managing, but there are ways to eliminate and have it forgiven, which gives you the leg up that you need. But here's the thing, you're kind of leading into sort of what I was intending on saying as part of my introduction as to sort of why I'm here, because my mission first and foremost here is to be an educator, right? And to educate Canadians and business owners that when they have debt problems, it's actually a legal problem. I'll explain that in a minute, because that seems a bit vague for some people. They don't understand the connection there, and I will explain that. But when we look at debt when we look at the way Canadians handle debt, we're quite unique in a few ways. First and foremost, and this is probably universal, being in debt is not something people freely want to talk about. Like you said, you cross your fingers, you bury your head in the sand, and you hope that it's going to go away. There's also an incredible amount of shame and embarrassment. That scarlet letter that I'm a loser and I've lost this money, and maybe I'm even looking at bankruptcy, which is the ultimate scarlet letter for people, right? Not wanting to go bankrupt. So Canadians will go, this is what makes us very unique. We will go to great lengths to hide that debt and hide it from others. And what's also unique about that is we have the ability to do it. If you look at many countries around the world, when you're drowning in debt, if you're dirt poor and you've lost everything, people know it, it's obvious. In Canada, you can fake it for quite some time, because we as Canadians are consistently being seduced by credit card companies and banks and loans and lines of credit, somehow leading us to believe that if they're lending it to us, we must be okay with that and we can pay it back. And then before you know it, they're drowning in it. And you can go to the extreme, and I've seen this happen. You can have an individual, only in Canada, they say, you can have an individual who doesn't have a penny in the bank, who is in debt of over $500,000. This is a client that I'm talking about. And the only car they can afford to buy is a brand new one. Because somehow throughout this $500,000 of debt, they've managed to maintain a decent credit rating and they get approved to lease a brand new vehicle. I mean, it's madness when you think about it on that level. So that's another issue. The fact that we bury this as a secret so deep and we don't talk about it openly, the education's not there. Often we get our sources from conversations with people and so on. It's just Canadians don't know where to go and they don't realize that it's a legal problem. Did you want me to sort of define what I mean by that, or?
Well, because I think that's important to understand, and you know, I think everyone, and I won't say playing the game, but everyone understands the rules of the road. They may not be the right ones, and so in the best interest of you, your business, and your long-term personal and business health. So maybe explain, when you say debt problems are a legal problem, explain what that means and why better to address them head on than pretend they don't exist.
Exactly. Well, and you said it right off the bat. The only thing you know for sure is what's going to happen if you do nothing. You know for sure, if you are on that downward spiral of debt, you absolutely know 100% what is going to happen. The creditors will start calling, you will start to get sued and be taken to court and so on. So I think the best way I can explain this is through an analogy with other disciplines of law. So let's take, for example, criminal law, the most obvious. You get charged with a crime. The very first thing you're going to do is get a lawyer to defend you, correct? And if for some reason you don't know that you have a right to a lawyer, the police are required by law to inform you of that right. And if you can't get one, to actually provide you with one. It's entrenched in our Constitution. It's Section 10B of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So we know that. So let's pretend criminal lawyers didn't exist. What would happen to all those people? They would probably all end up in jail. If you take another discipline, such as personal injury law, right? Another big discipline of law these days, you get cut off of disability payments. You go to a lawyer to help defend your legal rights in getting those payments and getting reinstated. Or you're hurt in a car accident and you need to sue for some damages. You're no longer able to work. Well, you have a lawyer helping you to do that. And without that, you might be walking away with a Tim Hortons gift card. And so when I tell you that debt is a legal problem, it is just the same as criminal law and personal injury law and so on. But what happens when Canadians find themselves in overwhelming amounts of debt? Where do they go? And most of you are going, I don't know. And one of the most obvious answers that most Canadians do know about is they go to bankruptcy trustees, insolvency trustees. And then what happens is 150,000 Canadians go bankrupt when they didn't have to. So this is the point I'm trying to make, that debt law, your legal rights when it comes to debt is no different than criminal or personal injury or real estate or any of it. And that then begs the question, I'm sure people in the audience are wondering, well, if that's the case, why isn't it advertised? Why don't we know about it? Why is there not one of these law firms on every single corner in every single city in Canada? And that, unfortunately, Ian, is a question that I can't answer. I don't know why. I feel that Canadians have been abandoned in this particular discipline of law because they don't know. And that's what I'm fighting hard to try and change right now. That's the awareness that I hope to bring to the room today.
Okay, and so specific to that, because that you've highlighted, you can't get around it. So let's drill down with what the importance of working with someone like yourself, or again, the people that are helping you in your business that are expert in finance or debt, insolvency, these sorts of things. What's the, walk me through my business. I've added some debt. I'm really feeling as though, and I think this is an important comment that one of my colleagues at the Best Waterloo Business Economic Support Team of Waterloo Region, you referenced the hospitality and tourism sector. So if you're a restaurant, you're a hotel, you're doing something that relies on people, and they've been the first to close, last to open, and there's many people in that service sector, or personal services is another example. They've taken on this debt, and reopening doesn't mean recovery for many businesses. It's going to take a period of time of, we've just gotten rid of some of the, or ended some of the public health measures. We're hoping those don't have to come back, but there's no guarantee that every one of your customers or potential customers are in the same headspace of saying, I want to go into a full restaurant, or I want to go to a Leafs game or a Rangers game, or I want to go to the amusement park. So what you see is the recovery is going to be uneven at best, and it depends on where you are as a sector you're in your own business. But there must be some things along the way of saying, how do you manage your own specific business cash flows, renegotiate debts, and maybe we should start to get into a little bit of that. Is what are some of those practical, tangible things, that questions to ask and information to get?
Well, it's so I'm not quite clear on what you're asking me as far as, like, what is the process if people need our help?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, what are some of the there must be a checklist as you're going through and saying, here are the questions that you're going to be asked around your financial situation, your cash flow, where you're at. I mean, those are what should people come prepared to when they're coming for a discussion with you? What do they need what information they need to give you so you can start to draw a picture of what the solution looks like?
It's pretty straightforward, actually. Well, I mean, it's straightforward in the beginning, but each case is different in its complications. But generally speaking, the first thing we look at is the debt load, right? And it is, whenever we're assisting any of the clients, it's really algorithms that help to determine how much debt can be forgiven and how many of their assets can be saved. Because that's what's key here, is not just eliminating that debt using federal legislation, but preserving the assets that they have at the same time, right? So when we get a general picture, and that can be easily done in initial conversation right off the bat, and then we can go into more detail later. If we get a general picture of their debt load, their income, we always do it based on a monthly income. This legislation applies the same to individuals as it does to businesses as well. So any mortgages on properties, what's still owing, and so on. And when we get a general snapshot of where the money is and where it's owed, we can determine fairly quickly whether or not they will qualify to eliminate a lot of that debt and have it forgiven.
So talk about the legislation you're referring to. Explain what that, I mean, that's a government program. It's a federal government program, I assume. But to talk about that legislation and how it benefits a business or an individual that's working to, to deal with an unmanageable debt load.
Okay, well, what we're looking at specifically is we deal with the Bankruptcy Insolvency Act, which is about this big, and all of the options available to Canadians in that Bankruptcy Insolvency Act. And then, of course, the next question is going to be, well, isn't that what trustees do? So why aren't you guys just the trustees? And I think I need to explain a little more about legal rights before I compare those two to give everybody a clear picture. So, because I'm not sure the audience still understands that it's a legal right. So let me lay this out first. So when you are in overwhelming amounts of debt, and let's say it eventually gets to the point where the collection departments are calling, right? And creditors will often go that route first. They start getting harassed by the phone calls over and over again. When that is no longer working, it eventually goes to their legal department, who starts the action. So it can be the form of taking you to court to be sued. And this includes CRA as well. They have their legal team that can freeze your bank accounts, garnish your wages, put liens and caveats on your property, and so on, right? So when you are up against potentially legal action, you need legal representation. You need a legal defense to help you out with that. So, because it's your right as a Canadian to preserve as many of the assets.
Well, maybe explain that part. So you're dealing with in the legal system as it relates to bankruptcy. What are those legal rights that you would advise or can help someone through? Because clearly, I would have trouble defending a parking ticket, let alone getting into insolvency, bankruptcy, any of those things. Because as you say, it's probably 3 binders full of legislation that no one understands. Certainly not a business owner that's trying to operate their business. But talk about the legal rights on the part of the debtor to manage through that and use the tools that are available.
Well, first of all, you have the legal right to be represented by counsel that will offer you client attorney privilege, right? And then that counsel has the right to help you strategize your finances and making the right moves in order to protect those assets and then to qualify for some debt forgiveness. Again, I think this is also best illustrated if I talk about some of the other things that are out there that people are more familiar with, okay? So if we start talking about, so let's look at the typical Canadian, whether they're proactive and wanting to do something about their debt load, or they are being chased by these creditors and being threatened to be taken to court. Where do you go when you're in debt? Well, we're bombarded right now with counseling services all over the place, all kinds of them, all shapes and sizes. The issue with that, and I'm not saying they don't do a bad job at counseling. If debt counseling is what you need, if you need strategies on how to better handle your money, these are wonderful places to go. But when you're in serious trouble, the issue with these places is that they are often unqualified, unvetted, untrained, uncertified, and unregulated. Okay? And they do not have the power to enact this federal legislation to eliminate your debt, right? So, okay, if you're consolidation loans, that's not eliminating your debt either. That's just pulling it all together at a lower rate to squeak you by slowly. Then what are other options? And if people in the audience sit and think about that and say, okay, where would I go in that position? Most Canadians say insolvency trustees. Trustees in bankruptcy, they've officially changed their name to insolvency trustees, so bankruptcy trustees. So yes, bankruptcy trustees are regulated, they are trained, they are certified, they're vetted, and they do have the power to eliminate and forgive debt, to give you that leg up. to get rid of that monkey on your back. However, and this is something that most Canadians are not aware of, the difference between how trustees are helping Canadians with debt and how we do it from our legal approach is the trustees actually are mandated by law to represent the creditors. So they do try to help their clients by eliminating their debt, but they are also obligated to the creditors to collect as many of your assets as they possibly can. That's their job. And most Canadians don't understand that.
Yeah, that's pretty important for people to understand is who even if you're engaging if I hear you correctly, if you're involved in bringing the trustee in insolvency or whatever, insolvency trustee, their prime directive is to represent the creditor. Whereas you're saying your job is, because you represent the business owner, is to maximize and use all the tools available to the best advantage of the business. That's an important distinction.
Bingo. That's very well put. And not only that, Ian, trustees are actually paid a government tariff percentage based on how much they collect from you. So the more assets they can seize from their clients on behalf of the creditors, the more they take, the more they make. And essentially, since we're going down this path, if we have poised this to be this legal situation where you're in trouble with the law and you need a defense lawyer, by going straight to the trustee first and telling them everything you have and where it all is and all your property and all your assets and your grandmother's jewelry in the back of the closet worth $10,000, you have essentially gone to the prosecutor for help.
So explain. So it's important distinction. There's still a role for the insolvency trustee. There's a time and a place to use
Absolutely
legal parts, and because I think I want to go in a minute to kind of the actual opportunities to eliminate or reduce your debt level, because I think people want to know that part. But what would be if you kind of said, hey, it's really important to come and see us if you're in this situation. If you're in a slightly different situation, an insolvency trustee might be the best opportunity.
No, I would, if I can be so bold as to say, I would never say go to a trustee first, because you've got nothing to, well, you've got everything to lose by not going legal first. Go find out your legal options first. If that's not jiving for you for some reason, I don't know how, we've never actually had a client that we've provided a solution with that's walked away and said, yeah, no, thanks, I'll go to a trustee. You will never get a better solution because our mandates are different, because we're here to represent the creditors or the clients.
Yeah,
mandated to represent the creditors.
For many small businesses, and I guess this is, I mean, it's important for people to understand that distinction. For many small businesses, the advisors that they have are more likely to be their accountant, because they have to do their withholding taxes, their business side. They have to deal with the accounting side, and usually it's too complicated for them to do it on their own. So they have an accountant who would be their business advisor. They may have their banker, because everyone has a banker who they would consider to be their advisor. Not necessarily, but that's what many would consider. Many don't have a lawyer at the ready, and I guess that's that. As you talk to your accountant and your banker, would be to say, the lawyer, if you're in this circumstance, is an investment of dollars that you should make, so you get the right representation and figure out where to take your specific situation, because it could go in any number of different ways, which we'll get to in just a minute. I mean, have I got that about right? Because I think that's what I hear you saying. I think it's important to recognize that for many businesses, they don't have a lawyer always at the ready, where they might have a banker.
And I'm not saying that coming to us, you have to retain our services before you get any information. Coming to us is finding out first and foremost, without the cost of a retainer. But let me go back to the accountant thing, because funnily enough, our corporate files, one of our greatest referral sources is accountants, because accountants are wonderful at working the numbers, but they are the frontliners of debt. They're going to be the first ones to see the red and then go, oh my God, 2 million to CRA. Just because they're good accountants doesn't mean they know what to do with that. How do you eliminate $2 million to CRA? They have no idea. They refer their clients to us in-house. And it's like, okay, I've got a client here drowning in debt. Can you have a conversation with them? And within a conversation, we can let them know whether or not we can help them with that situation. The accountant doesn't have the tools to do it. So we work with them to add that other tool to their toolkit as a referral. We do it with mortgage brokers. We do it with accountants. We do it with other law firms. Yeah.
It's all about getting the right professionals helping you with your specific situation.
Right.
Let's move on and say, as you're going through this and the advice that you're giving initially, whether someone retains you or not, but you're going to give them some advice on some of the options available to them. But get a little more granular. I mean, when you talk about eliminating or forgiving debt, what does that look like, whether it's personal or corporate? But I mean, if there are mechanisms and there are regulations or legislations that make it possible, you need to understand that's where the legal part comes in. But talk a little bit about what some of those opportunities, like what would give some examples of a small business that may have a mortgage, or they have their asset thing, they might have cash flow issues. What are some of the options for to either forgive or eliminate, and how does that actually work?
Ian, I swear you're reading my mind, because one of the things I intended, I love to illustrate by example and real life examples, real cases where we've helped out, and locally as well in KW area. And I have the perfect case, which was just last year, I'd say small to medium-sized business, because they had 50 full-time employees. So the day COVID hit, they started hurting. Boom, shutdowns, boom, they couldn't recover. And what happens to most business owners, and you probably agree with me on this one of the most common things that happens when businesses, when income drops or is cut off completely and you still have to pay those bills, one of the most common things businesses will do is they'll put off their source deductions. They just won't contribute quite yet, because they'll use those source deductions to the federal government, the HST and the GST and so on, to keep them afloat, thinking, okay, things will open up and get better. We'll get back on our feet again and we'll be okay. This particular business did exactly that, like many, many others do. And while this number I'm going to tell you about sounds shocking, it's real and it's done very quickly. This gentleman found himself $3 million into debt to CRA. He was about 2 weeks from having his doors padlocked and shut down for good, right? The federal government doesn't want businesses going bankrupt. Businesses going bankrupt stop hiring people. People who lose their jobs stop buying things. It's economic stimulus. They don't want it to happen. So we were able to deal with this business. Not only did they not close for another single day, we were able to eliminate the debt to get them back into the black and manageable. The employees had no idea that it had happened. The sign didn't change, the doors didn't close, and this business continues to thrive today because of that economic forgiveness, because of that debt forgiveness.
It's important to know that those options are available, but it needs to be done in the right way, in the right conversation with CRA and the right folks. I guess what's interesting about that example is now that was at the front end of COVID, but ordinarily that's
in the middle. It was in the middle, yeah.
But that's a common thing that in normal non-COVID times when you get in trouble, that's because it's a cash flow source that many businesses have and can use. But as COVID started, that was actually one of the immediate things that business government said that what they could do to assist business. But it ends up being a long-term debt because they weren't forgiving it. they said you gave you extension and say, don't pay your, WSIB or whatever it was, payroll deductions or some of those deductions. But it wasn't a freebie for any business. It was just pushed down to be a receivable 6 or 12 or 18 months down the road. It still becomes debt. I guess that's one of the things that has created that bubble in addition to normal debt. You've seen a lot of that through as a result.
A lot. What's terrifying, particularly right now, we work closely with a gentleman who specializes in getting grants and so on for businesses. That's his specialty. And as of March, the government is starting to stop with all of these financial aids, and they're starting to call in the loans. I've never seen, so in the 2 years during COVID, I've never seen CRA lay off to the extent that they have. Like, I actually witnessed CRA putting garnishees on people's wages on pause during COVID. That has never happened in the history of CRA. But the fun is over, and they're starting to collect. So not only are the programs drying up, according to my source, he said by the end of May, they're all done.
Yeah, they are.
All these programs are finished. And then they're going to start collecting. As much as they don't want to put businesses out of business, they've doled out a lot of money and they need to start collecting. So I think you're going to see it happen exponentially. And that's why I'm working so hard to get the awareness out now, because don't even wait until that time. If you've got unnecessary debt right now, be proactive about it and do something about it. And again, I mean, I will bet you most of the people in this room have never heard this before, which is ridiculous. That we don't know our legal rights as Canadians. It is a legal right, and it's not complicated. You don't have to be a hotshot corporate business person to secure Sarnowski Debt Law Firm. You can be a mom. We help mom and pop shops all the time. And that's the backbone of our local economy here. Let's face it, right? Like, how many mom and pop businesses, and it's just heartbreaking. I drive down the road and I see closed signs, out of business signs, and it just breaks my heart, because I think, man, if I could be in touch with them, if I had known them, maybe I could have stopped that. I could have helped stop that. They'd still be open and so on, right?
So I think that's building the awareness. Part of what we're doing today is take a good, hard, honest assessment of your financial situation, where your cash flow is likely to be in the next 3 to 12 months, probably 6 to 12 months, because that's going to be a very difficult period of time as programs do dry up. And things like, and we've already made this crystal clear to the government, that loan programs like CEBA, the Canada Emergency Banking program, which was originally 40,000, of which 10,000 was to be forgiven, and now it's maximum of 60, and I think 20,000 of that can be forgiven as long as you pay at the right sequence the other 40,000. There's still a lot of extra debt that's got people through. So we're already having conversations with the government of saying those extra debt, you're going to have to do better than the 1/3 forgiveness. They're going to have to do that, which effectively takes some off of small businesses' balance sheet, and say the government's going to have to write that off, include that in their debt. They're just going to have to do that. There are too many businesses where, as you described, they've gotten, and in many cases, not because they couldn't cash flow their normal operating debt. It's these extra amounts that have been of COVID. Right. So that's one specific that the government can actually do itself. It can, through policy, through a budget, it can say we're increasing that debt forgiveness for small businesses. You still got to pay back this portion, but we can do that. You're talking about what you've just described with the example. Is already enshrined in legislation. It's already available. It's something that businesses should be taking a look at right now. That would be, I don't want to say ordinary debt, but non-COVID debt are things that you should be looking at right now. Because if you're, and I guess this is, maybe I pose this as a question to you. My observation is probably 40% of businesses have done really well through COVID, because if you didn't have to have people coming in, it's been an inconvenience, but you've done fine. 40%, it was an impact, but you're probably okay. But you got 20 to 30% of businesses that will, unless things turn on a dime, which is not likely to happen. Again, hospitality, tourism, they are going to find within months that they cannot manage their debt. And it really is those folks that should be asking those questions right now, especially the small restaurant or the personal services business. Are those the ones that should be asking those questions now and getting ahead of their cash flow is not going to meet their needs to service debt?
I think I can even simplify it a little more, and just rather than making it something very complicated where we're asking people to strategize on their own first, or try to determine whether they qualify and who they should go to. Let's simplify it to this. If you have any debt whatsoever, whether it's 10,000, 100,000, or $1 million, if you are concerned that you're not going to be able to pay it back, and not necessarily today, but somewhere down the road or whenever, you need to know that. And if you're not sure, you can find out from us. We will easily draw you the picture. And the sooner you figure that out, the better. Because if you're waiting for what you say, yes, the people are going to lobby with the government. They will try to get the government to raise those forgiveness levels from 20 grand to maybe 30 grand. But you know how long that takes, right? If and ever. And then it's still not the whole amount. And you've still got the rest of that debt to cover. Well, we consider ourselves in the emergency industry. So one of the misconceptions people will have, as soon as you say you're dealing with anything legally, they get this vision of, oh God, it's going to take forever. It moves slowly. And we don't go to court for this. We're not at the mercy of going to court for this. And in extreme cases, if they're about to be shut down, we can process a file within 24 hours, right? Because that's how important it is to keep these businesses afloat. That's how important it is to the Canadian economy to help keep these businesses afloat, which keeps our Canadian individuals afloat and so on. So my recommendation would be, Ian, if you have even an inkling that you are looking at some debt that's unmanageable or even just unnecessary, then call us and find out if there's anything we can do. That's it.
Okay. So that's an important message. So give a bit more granular around who you would interact with. And it sounds to me like you would interact with CRA on the federal side. You might deal with the Ontario government and the revenue department or finance department in I think is where it's at actually in the province of Ontario, which is source deductions, etc. Possibly WSIB, I would imagine. Maybe you have other debtors like private sector debtors, and there's always a sequence of who's in what order. Do you deal with?
The easiest general categories I can tell you is we deal with exclusively unsecured debt, which means mortgages and leases, which are considered secured, we can't touch. You can't touch that. But any form of unsecured debt, which includes CRA, credit cards, lines of credit, payday loan company loans, and so on. All of that is under the umbrella of unsecured debt. And they are all treated as equal creditors in this formula, all of them. And let me address CRA specifically, because most people have this image, too many Hollywood movies with IRS agents, that CRA is this big bad beast that takes control over your whole life. You can't talk back to them. And once they've made a decision, that's that. That cannot be further from the truth. I actually engaged in a conversation with the president of a large leasing corporation who refused to believe me. He said, that's not what my lawyers tell me. When CRA puts the hammer down, that's that. My team has over 7,000 successfully completed cases that will beg to differ with that. That will prove you wrong on that one. And quite often, when it means saving a business with a lot of employees, like the business, the example I told you about last year there in Kitchener, they're quite grateful. CRA will say to us, "What took you so long?" Because they're glad. They don't want, and the effects, if you look at the long-term effects of debt, even on individuals, if you look at the effects physically, emotionally, psychologically, strokes and heart attacks, suicide, mental health issues, substance abuse issues. If you look at the cost of programming, welfare programming to help Canadians out after that, it far outweighs forgiving a couple of million here and there.
Okay, we're coming towards the last few minutes that we have, but I think one of the things, and whether getting people to get into that mindset, is there an online tool of you've made it fairly easy, but is there a list of questions that they should be thinking about and then contacting, or how would they go? What's the best step for them to?
The best step, like I said, is just know, because in the beginning, in the initial stages, when we have it's literally a 5 to 10 minute conversation on the phone where I ask you some basic questions. So know how much debt, but I don't ask, like I said, you've got the instantly, as soon as you engage in a conversation with us, you've got that client attorney privilege. We don't need last names. We don't need account numbers. We just need to know generally how much debt have you got and who do you owe it to make sure that it is unsecured debt, not secured debt. How much income do you have? Are there dependents in the household? Sometimes your business is tied to your personal. That's a different story, but really general basic questions that people already know. Like if somebody out there is thinking that I am in debt, they kind of have a good idea of how much they owe already and how much they make every month. And then what other assets that they may have. We'll ask them about that as well.
Yeah, but even getting some of those basics. I mean, some people really. I was hired to be the president of the chamber not because I'm good with the finance side. I have great with that. I may have other skills. Finance is not one of them. I can read the numbers, but I wouldn't know where to go and get them. So, I mean, the important part is
again, we would ask in an initial conversation, what do you know? I'm telling you, the majority of people give you the answer on the spot in 5 minutes because we don't need it to the penny. We just need a general picture. And then we can send them off with saying, okay, we'll find out for sure how much that is and how much that is. And then we'll talk again tomorrow. And that's it.
Yeah, so I mean, the important part, the takeaway for the audience and those listening is, I think you've said it. If you've got any concern about debt now, or you think it's coming, then get that basic information in your head and make a phone call to someone.
Protect yourself. Protect your assets. You worked hard all your life to have the house, to have the car, to have your RSPs, to have your ESPs if your kids are under 18. And they can all be seized if you go to a trustee in bankruptcy to eliminate the debt. All of them.
Okay, last question, and this is maybe it's more in relation to the proximity to the election campaign. There's an election campaign coming provincially. Is there something that the parties should be, is there changes that would be even more helpful to help business around these challenges at the provincial level or federal level that would make it even easier than it is? Or are the tools there, we just need to publicize or broadcast it and get them utilized better?
Answer B, the tools are there and the legislation is federal, which is why this applies to Canadians coast to coast. And again, it's not unusual for the government to have these solutions but not advertise them. I don't understand, quite frankly, why the Law Society has not gotten behind this. This is a legal discipline where lawyers have abandoned Canadians on this. That to me, the onus should be on organizations like that to help me get out this information to Canadians and raise awareness and educate them to protect themselves.
All right. That is a very fascinating discussion, an important one, because many, especially small and medium-sized business, are going to be having some of those, are already having those questions, and important for them to know what the next step is that they should be taking to, as you say, protect themselves and their assets. So thanks so much for joining us today, Debbie. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure, Ian. Thanks so much.
All right, and that does bring us to the end of today's session. Thanks again to our title sponsor of the series, Manulife, our platinum sponsor of the series, the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region, and March sponsor, RBC. Today's event sponsor, Sarnowski Debt Law, and finally to all of you for joining us today. As a reminder, we do host a new Business Success Series session every Wednesday at 1 p.m., and we'll be taking a short break for March break next week. We look forward to welcoming you back on March 23rd for our next session, Top Things Employers Need to Know About Immigration Laws when Hiring or Retaining Immigrants and International Students, which is a hugely important aspect of our talent needs here in the region of Waterloo and frankly, right across the country. So join us for an insightful discussion on why to hire temporary foreign workers, and that can be part of your business, overall business HR strategy, especially at a time when immigration is currently meeting 100% of new labor growth in Canada. Jennifer Rogeman of Rogeman Immigration Law joins us to discuss how to utilize temporary foreign workers who are already in our local cities, including international students in our 3 post-secondary schools. Embracing newcomers into our region is essential for our business growth and will enrich the diversity within our community. To register and to find out more about other events, please do visit us at greaterkwchamber.com. Please share this series with your friends and colleagues and join us most Wednesday afternoons for another edition of the Business Success Series, because if it's Wednesday, it's the Business Success Series. Thanks so much.